The Council of the Intergalactic Coalition was a place where logic, diplomacy, and sometimes brute force shaped the fate of countless civilizations across the stars. The members, each representing an array of star systems, had witnessed eons of negotiations, power struggles, and countless close brushes with war, but none had been as dangerously tense as the Cold War between the two most powerful factions in the known galaxy, the Zorath Dominion and the Threlon Syndicate. For years, these two forces had tiptoed on the edge of total annihilation, each trying to outmaneuver the other in a galaxy-wide stalemate. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Neither side could afford to back down, and both were too proud to negotiate peace. Galactic trade routes had been frozen, alliances had fractured, and neutral planets found themselves locked in webs of espionage. Entire sectors of space had become militarized zones, patrolled by fleets capable of obliterating entire worlds. But the spark that would change everything came not from a secret weapon or covert diplomacy but from a relatively small planet in a distant arm of the galaxy, Earth, known to the Coalition as a Deathworld due to its harsh climates, aggressive fauna, and volatile geology. Earth's inhabitants, humans, were considered resilient but backward by the more advanced species. Earth had only recently been allowed into the Coalition after centuries of observation. The humans' development of spaceflight and their knack for survival on their dangerous homeworld had earned them respect, if not outright admiration. But what truly caught the attention of the Coalition was not Earth's technology or political systems, it was their sports. Humanity had a tradition, particularly in the coldest months of the year, of participating in extreme winter sports. These activities, both daring and absurd, involved racing down mountains of snow, launching themselves off cliffs, and skating at dangerous speeds over ice. The Coalition had watched these sports with growing curiosity, especially since they combined an astonishing blend of agility, risk, and sheer tenacity that few species could fathom. One winter, as tensions between the Zorath Dominion and the Threlon Syndicate reached a boiling point, the Council of the Intergalactic Coalition found itself in an unprecedented position. Both sides had mobilized their fleets near a shared neutral zone, and war seemed inevitable. The Council was desperate for a way to de-escalate the situation. It was the human ambassador, a sharp-eyed diplomat named Sarah Vance, who came up with a solution so strange that it initially seemed laughable. Why not settle this the way we Earthlings do, with competition, not destruction? We have winter sports that test both skill and endurance in extreme environments. What better way to prove strength and superiority than a contest on the harshest terrain? Sarah proposed at an emergency coalition meeting. The chamber had fallen silent. Zorathians and Threlons, known for their arrogance and fierce warrior cultures, exchanged bewildered glances. Earth was a young member of the coalition, hardly in a position to offer solutions to a galaxy-wide standoff, but there was something disarming about the idea, something so simple that it evoked the competitive spirit in both races, and perhaps, most importantly, it wasn't war. After much deliberation and despite the disbelief of many other coalition members, the Zorath Dominion and the Threlon Syndicate agreed to the terms. A Galactic Winter Games would be held on Earth, a neutral battleground where both sides could compete in human winter sports to prove their strength and resolve. The winner would claim dominance not through war, but through the ultimate display of skill and endurance. Within weeks, a massive intergalactic event was planned. The Coalition's finest engineers and organizers transported spectators and dignitaries from all over the galaxy to Earth, constructing viewing arenas high in the mountains of a place the humans called the Swiss Alps. Massive screens broadcasted the events to far-flung planets, and interstellar feeds buzzed with excitement over what was now being called the Galactic Frostclash. The humans, in their typical fashion, welcomed the event with a mix of bewilderment and enthusiasm. The world's most dangerous winter sports were set to become the stage for intergalactic diplomacy, and Earth's top athletes would help oversee the contests. When the day arrived, both the Zorath Dominion and the Threlon Syndicate were represented by their finest warriors, battle-hardened soldiers, and elite athletes, none of whom had ever encountered Earth's bitter cold or unpredictable snowstorms. The first event was the downhill ski race, a sport that required not only speed but precision. The Threlon representative, a towering, four-armed athlete named Krektor, eyed the steep mountain slope with suspicion. Zorath's champion, clad in lightweight body armor, was more confident, relying on his agility and enhanced reflexes. What followed was a spectacle that astonished the galaxy. The Threlon athlete, more accustomed to warm desert worlds, faltered almost immediately, his alien physiology struggling to adapt to the freezing cold. The Zorathian champion fared slightly better, his reflexes keeping him in the race, but even he couldn't fully master the sheer unpredictability of the snow-covered mountain. To the surprise of all, the human's casual relationship with danger proved to be an advantage as Earth's veteran athletes demonstrated the near-impossible feats that could be accomplished with the right skill set. Next came ice hockey, a fast-paced, brutal sport that required teamwork and physical strength. The Zorathians and Threlons, both aggressive species, excelled at the violent aspects of the game, clashing fiercely on the ice. However, they quickly learned that brute force wasn't enough. The humans' combination of speed, strategy, and grace baffled the Galactic warriors. The crowd watched in awe as the humans demonstrated finesse, showing how a game could be won not just by overpowering the opponent, but by outthinking them. As the games progressed, something unexpected began to happen. The Zorath and Threlon warriors, initially fierce rivals, started to admire each other's resilience. Despite their different physiologies and battle-hardened attitudes, they found common ground in their shared struggle to master Earth's winter sports. For the first time in decades, they weren't aiming weapons at one another, they were competing, laughing, and even congratulating each other on hard-earned victories and losses. By the final event, the Intergalactic bobsleigh race, the two sides were no longer enemies. The Zorathian and Threlon leaders watched from the grandstands, arms crossed, yet with newfound respect in their eyes. The competition had reminded them that there were ways to prove strength without resorting to annihilation. When the games concluded, there was no clear winner. Both sides had earned victories in different events, and the human athletes had demonstrated skills that were respected by both alien factions. But something more important had happened. The Cold War had been thawed, not by negotiations or threats, but by a simple idea: shared competition. In the end, the Intergalactic Coalition credited Earth with one of the most unexpected diplomatic victories in history. The Zorath Dominion and the Threlon Syndicate, having fought together in the icy mountains of Earth, agreed to a truce, their leaders shaking hands on the same ground where they had once been prepared to wage war. And so, the galaxy learned that sometimes the most unlikely solutions, the ones born from humility, humor, and a little human madness, were the ones that worked best. The truce between the Zorath Dominion and the Threlon Syndicate was a momentous occasion, one that rippled across the galaxy with a mixture of surprise, celebration, and, in some corners, skepticism. No one could believe that something as absurdly simple as a series of human winter sports had accomplished what decades of diplomatic negotiations had failed to achieve: peace between two of the galaxy's most powerful and warlike factions. The celebrations on Earth were enormous. Earthlings had watched the Intergalactic Games unfold with rapt attention, and they were quick to claim their place in history as the species that ended one of the galaxy's longest-standing conflicts. News outlets broadcasted footage of the events endlessly, showing the moment when the Threlon Syndicate's leader, High Imperator Galvek, and the Zorath Dominion's Supreme Commander Varkan, shook hands on a snowy mountaintop in the Swiss Alps. However, beneath the surface of the grand celebrations, subtle tensions remained. While the truce was a huge victory, the rivalry between the Zorathians and Threlons was far from truly resolved. Both factions had come to an uneasy peace, but old wounds ran deep, and there were factions within each empire that still pushed for dominance. Meanwhile, Earth itself had become a focal point of intergalactic attention. Suddenly, the so-called Deathworlders were seen as more than just a backwater species on a dangerous planet. They were celebrated as peacemakers, with Earth's cultures and traditions, especially their extreme sports, gaining widespread fascination. Alien tourists flocked to Earth, curious to experience the famed winter sports that had become synonymous with strength, bravery, and strategy. In the weeks following the truce, the coalition proposed a new initiative, one that no one had anticipated. Given the success of the games, it was suggested that Earth become a permanent host for the Galactic Winter Games, to be held every 5 years. What had started as a desperate attempt to avoid war was now being formalized as a series of intergalactic sporting events. The games would serve as a platform for diplomacy, competition, and cultural exchange. While Earth's leaders were hesitant at first, the potential benefits were enormous. Hosting the Galactic Winter Games would bring unprecedented attention and investment to Earth, raising its status in the galaxy. But it would also mean opening the planet up to even more alien visitors, and possibly exposing the human race to dangers it hadn't yet fully understood. In an emergency meeting of the United Earth Government, top leaders from across the globe gathered to discuss the implications. Sarah Vance, The human ambassador who had originally proposed the games as a solution, sat at the head of the table, her eyes scanning the room filled with generals, scientists, diplomats, and economists. "Hosting the Galactic Winter Games will change everything," she said, her voice steady. "It will bring us into the center of galactic politics, culture, and influence, but we need to be ready for the challenges that come with that." General Harris, a grizzled military leader who had always viewed alien species with caution, leaned forward. "You're talking about turning Earth into a playground for some of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Zorathians and Threlons alone could wipe us out if things go sideways. Have you thought about the security risks?" Sarah nodded. "Of course, General, but we've already seen that these competitions have a way of bringing species together. The coalition will ensure Earth's safety during the games. Besides, the economic benefits alone could transform Earth's place in the galaxy. Imagine the technology, the knowledge we could gain from closer ties with other civilizations." A scientist, Dr. Ramirez, raised his hand. "Not to mention the opportunities for scientific exchange. We're already learning more about alien physiology and environments from the games. If we can collaborate more closely with these species, we could make advances in medicine, physics, and space exploration that would take us centuries to achieve on our own." The room buzzed with debate. Some were excited by the prospect of Earth becoming a galactic hub, while others were concerned about the risks. Would Earth be able to handle the influx of visitors? Could humans truly compete on a galactic level in the long term, or would they be seen as a mere novelty? Amid the discussions, Sarah Vance made her final argument. "We have to face reality. The galaxy has already taken notice of us, whether we like it or not. Earth is now on the intergalactic map. We can either embrace that role and shape our future, or we can shy away from it and let others dictate our fate. The Galactic Winter Games offer us a way to build alliances, improve our defenses, and solidify our place in the coalition." After hours of deliberation, the United Earth government agreed to host the first official Galactic Winter Games in 5 years, allowing enough time to prepare the infrastructure, technology, and security needed to accommodate the diverse array of species that would descend upon Earth. It was a bold decision, but one that they believed could secure Earth's place in the future of the galaxy. 5 years later, the first official Galactic Winter Games. 5 years passed, and the Galactic Winter Games returned to Earth with even greater fanfare than before. Alien delegations from hundreds of species arrived, their ships crowding Earth's orbit like never before. The event was not just a competition, it was a diplomatic extravaganza, with cultural exchanges, trade agreements, and even peace treaties being signed in the background. The Zorathians and Threlons, once the bitterest of enemies, now sent joint delegations to compete in team events. Their former rivalry had given way to a grudging respect. The games had become a place where they could flex their muscles without bloodshed, where their competitive spirits could thrive without leading to war. The humans, of course, had trained relentlessly for the games. Earth's athletes were now seen as legends across the galaxy, celebrated for their boldness and ingenuity. While they couldn't always match the physical prowess of some alien species, their adaptability and cleverness made them formidable competitors. The opening ceremony of the Galactic Winter Games was a spectacle like no other. In the snowy mountains of Earth, under a sky filled with shimmering lights from the alien ships above, athletes from across the galaxy marched together. Humans stood proudly beside towering Zorathians, agile Threlons, and even species with wings, tentacles, or crystalline bodies. Sarah Vance stood on the grand stage, delivering the opening speech to the galaxy. "These games remind us that strength is not measured only by might, but by the ability to overcome challenges together. We have learned that competition need not lead to destruction, but to unity. Today, we celebrate not just the athletes, but the peace that these games have brought to the galaxy." As the games unfolded, the events were broadcast to billions across the galaxy. Once again, Earth's winter sports became the focus of intergalactic fascination. Skiing, bobsledding, and snowboarding were viewed with awe, while ice hockey became a universal favorite. Its fast-paced action thrilling species from every corner of the universe. But more than the sports, it was the spirit of cooperation and camaraderie that defined the games. The once bitter Cold War between the Zorath Dominion and the Threlon Syndicate had become a distant memory, replaced by a future of shared competition and mutual respect. And thus, what had started as a desperate gamble to avert war had grown into something far greater, a tradition that united the galaxy in ways no one could have foreseen. As the first official Galactic Winter Games progressed, the air buzzed with excitement and anticipation. Athletes from hundreds of worlds performed feats that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier, and spectators from all over the galaxy marveled at the audacity of it all. The games had grown beyond competition, they had become a symbol of unity. Earth had stepped into its role as a galactic host with surprising grace. Human athletes, though not as physically imposing as many alien species, made up for it with creativity, strategy, and resilience. Their ability to think on their feet and adapt to ever-changing conditions earned them respect across the galaxy. Where they lacked raw power, they compensated with clever teamwork and ingenuity, often pulling off unexpected victories in events such as bobsledding and ice hockey. As the final event approached, the once tense relationships between the Zorath Dominion and the Threlon Syndicate had all but dissolved into friendly rivalry. High Imperator Galvek and Supreme Commander Varkan, the two leaders who had once been poised to launch a galaxy-wide war, were now seen sitting together, watching the games with barely restrained amusement. They had bonded over the shared absurdity of the human sports they now both admired. But behind the scenes, political tensions still simmered. Not everyone had been satisfied with the peaceful outcome the games had fostered. Fringe factions within both the Zorathian and Threlon military ranks viewed the games as an embarrassment, a weak, non-violent solution to what they considered a matter of honor and dominance. Some of these factions were determined to reignite hostilities, believing that true power could only be established through war, not games. Sarah Vance, the human ambassador and the architect of the Galactic Winter Games, sensed this growing unrest. She had spent weeks meeting with alien dignitaries, including the Zorathian and Threlon delegations, ensuring that peace held strong. But even with the games serving as a symbol of unity, the fragility of the truce was always on her mind. It was clear to her that the future of peace depended on more than just a few sporting events. It required trust and cooperation, things that couldn't be forged overnight. The final event was the Intergalactic Relay, a high-stakes competition that combined several extreme winter sports into a single race. Each team consisted of representatives from different species, forcing athletes to collaborate across cultures, languages, and physical differences. It was a test not only of athleticism but of unity, which made it the perfect closing event. The relay was set to start on a treacherous mountain slope. Teams had to ski down a steep, icy incline, then pass the baton to their next teammate, who would race through a maze of ice tunnels on a hoverboard, before handing off to a figure skater who had to perform complex maneuvers on a frozen lake. The final stretch was a combination of snowboarding and aerial acrobatics, with athletes navigating a halfpipe surrounded by obstacles and launch pads. The spectators gathered in droves, both on Earth and across the galaxy. As the event began, teams from every corner of the universe were represented, including a joint team of Zorathians and Threlons, a gesture that had been inconceivable just years earlier. This team, led by Zorathian champion Reltor and Threlon speedster Lyrics, was a favorite to win, their competitive energy palpable as they prepared to face their opponents. The starting horn blared, and the first wave of skiers launched down the mountain at breakneck speeds. Snow and ice sprayed in all directions as athletes from vastly different worlds competed in unison. The crowd roared with excitement as the teams navigated the harsh conditions, some using advanced technology in their suits to help them balance, while others relied purely on skill. Reltor, a hulking Zorathian with skin like rock, thundered down the slope with surprising grace, passing the baton to Lyrics, who zoomed into the ice tunnels. As the event unfolded, it became clear that the Zorathian Threlon team was dominating. Their ability to work together, despite their cultural differences, had captivated the galaxy. By the time they reached the final snowboarding and acrobatics segment, they were neck and neck with the human team, led by the legendary athlete Daniel Cruz. It was during this last leg of the race that the unexpected happened. As Lyrics launched into the halfpipe, a massive explosion rocked the mountainside, sending shockwaves through the arena. The crowd gasped in horror as the snow-covered cliffs above began to crumble. Avalanches roared down the mountains, threatening to bury the athletes and spectators below. Panic spread as the stands shook, and people began scrambling to safety. Sarah Vance, standing with the other diplomats in the viewing area, quickly realized what had happened. Rogue factions from the Zorath Dominion and the Threlon Syndicate had orchestrated the explosion in a desperate attempt to sabotage the games and reignite the conflict. It was a calculated attack, designed to break the fragile peace by creating chaos and destruction. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed a nearby communication device and called for emergency teams to evacuate the area. But as she watched the avalanches approach, she knew there wasn't enough time. Then, something remarkable happened. Rather than fleeing, the athletes still on the course sprang into action. Lyrics, the Threlon speedster, pivoted midair, using her aerial acrobatics skills to redirect her flight path toward the crumbling cliffs. Daniel Cruz, the human snowboarder, followed suit, signaling to Raltor to do the same. Together, the athletes began working to create barriers and pathways in the snow, using their skills to divert the falling debris and carve escape routes for the trapped spectators. The crowd watched in awe as these competitors, once rivals, now allies, worked in perfect harmony. The Zorathian Threlon team, alongside the human athletes, used every trick they knew to save lives. Hoverboards were repurposed to ferry people to safety, and skiers launched themselves into dangerous areas to block falling ice. It was a display of unity and heroism that transcended any competition or race. When the dust finally settled, the avalanche had been contained, and all spectators were safe. The rogue faction's plan had failed spectacularly, and instead of reigniting the war, their sabotage had highlighted the strength of cooperation between former enemies. In the aftermath, High Imperator Galvek and Supreme Commander Varkan condemned the actions of the rogue factions and pledged to hunt down those responsible. Their public unity in the face of sabotage only solidified the peace that had been forged through the games. What could have been a disaster turned into a moment of profound solidarity. Sarah Vance stood in the aftermath, watching as the athletes embraced each other, no longer competitors but comrades. She realized that the Galactic Winter Games had achieved something far greater than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just about ending a Cold War, it was about proving that even the most unlikely allies could come together in times of crisis. The games had shown the galaxy that peace wasn't just a fleeting moment, it was a choice. And on that snowy mountaintop, the galaxy chose peace.